Here in Sweden it coincides with the age of criminal responsibility, reduced at 15.
Same in Denmark.
Regardless of age of consent, I think most people would be more perturbed by a 50-yo and an 18-yo dating than a 19-yo and a 17-yo dating. You do see the occasional, can a high school senior and sophomore date, question. And the consensus is usually that two high schoolers dating is almost always okay.
We're looking at you, Mr. DiCaprio.
I think Reddit's impression of this comes mostly from pornography, because it's far more common for it to be illegal to produce pornography under 18 even if it isn't illegal to have sex under 18.
So what you're saying is that most Redditors have experienced lots of porn and very little to no sex. Outrageous.
Where I live, it's 9 for girls, and 15 for boys. Don't let me get started about how fucked up it is and the fucked up situations it leads to, in some families.
What the fuck? Oh, the things that happen in this world.
Because there's a misconception in the US that the age of consent is 18. You have to be 18 to buy or participate in commercial nudity, porn, so people think that's the age of consent. It varies by state. A few are 18. Most are 16 and a couple are 17.
I swear man, sometimes this app makes me feel like a pedo. When I was 16 I met and got with my ex who was 15. By the time we caught feelings for each other we realized she had just turned 15 and I was about to turn 17. So a year and a half into the relationship I was a 18-year-old dating a 16-year-old. Which to a lot of goddamn Redditor, social media looks bad, but in reality we only had a 1 year and 9 months between us.
In my state 16 is also the age of consent, unless somebody holds a position of power. Based off what I have seen all over social media, a lot of people were 16 and doing older people, or talking to older people. My personal beliefs are against that, but whatever people want to do.
I remember girls in high school bragging about dating college guys and even 20-plus-year-olds.
In the United States, age of consent is ridiculously all over the place. Some states, 16 is the minimum age for consensual sex with an adult, whereas others it's 17 or 18. For a while, one state had it as low as 13 under certain circumstances. Legally purchasing porn is often capped at 18 for most places, while buying cigarettes goes from 18 to 21. Nationally, 21 is the usual drinking age, but you can be drafted for military service at 18. You can vote at 18, but be denied the ability to rent a car until you're 25. Some states allow licensed drivers at 16 and others at 16 but with restrictions. Pick a single fucking age for all of that shit.
You can rent a car under the age of 25. You just have to pay extra insurance that's expensive as fuck. I did it several times while traveling.
I believe the majority of users are from the U.S.
In most U.S. states the age of consent is 16 to 17, so that doesn't really make sense.
I am 55. I regard 32-year-olds as too young for me. Granted, there isn't a legal prohibition. Defining a specific age of consent is problematic. I'm glad I'm not a legislator that has to weigh in on that issue.
Even in the States most people think 17 and 19 is fine. It is when it is 16 and 25 when it gross, even if legal. It's really an arbitrary line to protect as many kids as possible. I've met 16-year-olds with the maturity of 20-somethings and 18-year-olds who act like they're 12. But if you have adults in their 40s dating girls or boys in their teens, there is a greater chance of harm depending on the society. Because if by 16 you can get a car, a job, rent an apartment, have some level of autonomy, there's not really that much of an issue with a power imbalance. But if you can't, then basically a 30-year-old with a car and a place to live could easily seduce a young kid with no recourse legally or for parents to intervene. Really, a 17 and 19-year-old dating is totally fine. I don't see why anyone would be mad about that. 19 and 14 or 16 and 40 are more problematic. But the arbitrary line literally just comes from societal expectations. At the moment 30-year-olds are living at home, so everyone's unhappy. But 16 to 18 is the average age of people becoming sexually active, so I think it's a good law. 18 versus 16 just depends on what we are allowing these kids to do outside of sex, and that's how we decide what's appropriate. In South America I met a guy that took me and my homies to show us around the country since we went on vacation and needed a guide. He was 30 years old and was dating an 18-year-old. And everyone there thought it was completely normal. At first we were in shock because we're from the US, but for everyone else it was fine, and then we got used to it and felt like it was normal also. I feel like US is very sensitive about age gaps, and age of consent stuff. Whereas everywhere else in the world shit is normal AF.
As someone who recently turned 20, a lot of it comes from perspective you gain with age. When you're 16/17 you feel mature. But once you're older you realize you really weren't. 16 to 20 is an absolutely gigantic gap development-wise. But that's just my opinion.
I agree that the development gap is huge, but you have to understand that not everything that is morally repulsive is or has to be a crime.
Americans, I suspect. Some guy the other day on Reddit said anyone slightly older who dates an 18-year-old is a pedo, which I called ridiculous. And factually wrong. But I got downvoted to buggery regardless. Lol.
Yeah, pretty much everyone's a pedo to some people. So the word completely loses its meaning. And because of that, I just don't care anymore. It's like the word, selfish. I've heard everything under the sun be called selfish, so it just has absolutely no meaning to me anymore when it's used to shame someone.
Reddit is dominated by U.S. opinions. The U.S. infantilizes its young adults and doesn't even give them the right to drink alcohol or smoke cigarettes till 21. Personally, I find the idea of a 16-year-old having sex with someone much older distasteful, but I can also understand why it is not illegal in many countries.
The alcohol being illegal for kids and youth is medically based, IIRC, since alcohol hinders brain development which continues through the early 20s.
As a fully formed adult I can't possibly think of a 16-year-old as anything but a child.
That's odd, I think of them as a teenager.
Age of consent in California is 18. Thus it's 18 in all Hollywood media. Spread from there.
In Germany, the age of consent is 14. I recently read about a 27-year-old dating a 19-year-old and many people were calling him predatory, which is hard for me to grasp as it wouldn't really be an issue here as long as both are 18.
14 is the age of consent, but I thought it's only for similar-aged people? Not an adult and a 14-year-old? Thank you. Have been woe-deering about the same thing. Here in Norway it's 16 too.
Your name though.
Reddit. Actually, most of social media is in a full-on anti-pedophilia echo chamber. Most people can't even properly define pedophilia and go on crazy tirades and conclusions. I've seen people saying a recently turned 18-year-old boy shouldn't have a relationship with a 17-year-old soon-to-be 18-year-old girl because it's pedophilia. And #X200B. These people are legit fucking morons with zero understanding of the terms, concepts they're talking about and laws related to such. They're essentially the same morons who think incestual relationships are bad because it leads to birth defects even though an incestual relationship doesn't always lead to, or can even lead to, remember homosexuals exist? Pregnancy. They are unable to critically engage with subjects. Unfortunately, these morons have the megaphone. The average Joe also doesn't understand anything related to this subject, and this means any argumentation against their terrible misunderstanding of the concepts comes across as, "You're deaf ing pedophilia, you pedophile." It's not a good look, so it's not worth engaging on the subject. This further reinforces the echo chamber.
That's correct answer. People just dumb.
American culture is a bit more Puritan and infantilized than Europe. Gay sex was outlawed in places until a 2003 Supreme Court verdict. Outrage and virtue signaling is a big part of American culture, unfortunately. America worships individualism. The documentary The Century of Self explains this well. So people can be hysterical about consensual sex and feel great, as if they did something for somebody.
America is such a strange place. They are the most sexually repressed society in the developed world, yet at the same time, the most impure. They have some of the harshest penalties for sex crimes in the developed world and prostitution is illegal, yet they have the most promiscuous dating culture and an entertainment industry that promotes so much sexual content and impurity.
Because it's 18 in California and Hollywood movies control people's minds. It's 16 or 17 in most places.
Part of it is simply that we tend to believe the things we are taught when we're young. We're not a super open-minded species when we get out of the formative years. Most of Reddit is virgins and never been on a date, so most opinions you see on Reddit with regards to relationships and sex you can take with a grain of salt. At my high school, pretty much all of the good-looking females were dating men 18 to 22 and maybe some older. It is what it is. When I was in college, I personally wasn't interested in high school girls. I just remembered during spring break in Padre, there were tons of high school girls underage drinking and hooking up with college-aged men. It is what it is. Who are we to judge what people are doing in their own time and who they are sleeping with?